The Judicial Inspectorate for Correctional Services is contemplating a bail funding system for accused individuals who are detained but who cannot afford to pay the small amounts of bail for non-violent crimes. Around 2,000 detainees are in jail because of this, adding to the overcrowding problem. The first stages of a privately sponsored feasibility study were presented to Parliament's Justice Portfolio Committee, and Inspecting Judge Edwin Cameron joins Fullview now to tell us more. Justice Cameron, good evening to you. Welcome. Thank you for your time. Let's start with a picture. Tell us about the inmate bulge in South Africa's facilities right now. And it may not be common knowledge that South Africa has the largest incarceration rates on the African continent.
Correct, Iman. What a great pleasure to be with you and SABC viewers. Iman, you're absolutely right. I like the word inmate bulge, and I might start using it myself from now onwards. We've got 150,000 prisoners, and it's by far the highest number of incarcerated individuals anywhere in Africa, the 12th highest in the world, far in excess of our proportion to our population. 3 times, for example, the number of people proportionately that Malawi incarcerates, higher even than Nigeria, much more populous states than we are. So that's the starting point, Iman. And if I can just smuggle in an advocacy point there, since you raised that point, we've got the whole thing wrong. We've got our carceral policy wrong. We've got our penal policy wrong. We shouldn't be starting with sending a small number of people to prison for excessively long times. We should be dealing with murder and other violent crimes right with a different methodology, which starts with crime intelligence, which former President Jacob Zuma destroyed in 2011 through corrupt and inappropriate criminally linked appointments. So we have to rebuild crime intelligence. We have to rebuild the CID, the detective services. We've got to rebuild policing. But the core of it is to start. So thank you for letting me smuggle that in, Iman. Let me get back to the question.
Well, and I'm going to TM the bulge, so we'll share the royalties. I'm just joking. But what you talked about there requires architectural and a structural makeover of the institutions that govern, or that manage or define our laws and the way that we respond to crime. It also leads us directly into the question of the highlight findings you made during this feasibility study.
Exactly. It's still in process, as you said in your introduction. It's being undertaken by the Bertha Institute of the University of Cape Town, funded by the Bertha Foundation, which is a South African-founded donor in London, Mr. Tony Tabatsnik, who is very interested and concerned about carceral issues in South Africa. And everything is on the table. We are going to be speaking through the feasibility study team led by Monica Rossi of UCT. We're going to be speaking to the National Prosecuting Authority, to judges, to magistrates, to the Parliamentary Committee, as we promised them on Friday morning, and of course, to all interested parties. The question is, can we do 2 things? The one is to do simple justice. We are talking about people whom magistrates, presiding judicial officers, whom investigating officers, whom prosecutors have all decided are entitled to bail. They don't have to be inside awaiting trial in the terrible conditions. I might say quickly, smuggling in another quick point, conditions for most prisoners in South Africa aren't what we want them to be, but for awaiting trial prisoners, they're worse. So this is a group of people who shouldn't be inside, who've been granted bail. They're not going to run away to Malawi. They're not going to interfere with witnesses. They're not going to commit further crimes. They've got addresses, but they can't afford bail. So we plan to do 2 things: remedy the basic injustice that people's poverty is keeping them in prison. And the second thing we hope to do is to alleviate the point that you started with, which is our terrible overcrowding in prisons.
I wanted to talk about the criteria that should be used in determining who qualifies, but I think in a sense it might be answered and covered by the fact that these are individuals who would have already met the criteria to have been granted bail, and those, those risks around granting bail would have been considered. Here's the issue, Justice Cameron, in the very limited time that we have, is how do you get buy-in from South Africans who are, psychologically and practically bludgeoned by crime and its effects, who want nothing more than to see people punished for their crimes, and who may yet think that this is another thing that they have to pay for? How do you win that group of people over to this idea?
It's a very good point, Iman, and the word you're looking for is a good Afrikaans word, which is a judicial word and an SABC word. South Africans, black and white, rich and poor, suburban, township and rural, are hot full of crime. So we acknowledge that, and that's why I say that there are effective ways of reducing the murder rate, of reducing copper cable theft, reducing cash and transit heists and zamazamas if we start at the right place. So we acknowledge that humbly, but we do fall back on the point that judicial officers, the justice system has said that these people should not be inside.
Well, how would all of this be funded?
Very good question, Iman. And can I just make a quick point? While we have said that these people should not begin, we will be looking at what kinds of crime. Should you look at someone granted 1,000 rand bail for gender-based violence? Should you look at helping someone who's committed domestic violence and has been granted 1,000 rand bail, assuming that it's a relatively trivial offence? Well, those are questions that the feasibility study team will be looking at. And how we will fund it will be from public sources. And that, of course, raises a question that the Deputy Minister raised with me last week. At least with bail, you have some reason to stand your trial. What if someone else is funding your bail? And our answer to that is yes, that's an important consideration. But people have many other good reasons to stand their trial than only the bail amount. And we revert to the fundamental injustice of having people who are in prison awaiting trial only because they're poor.
So clearly a work in progress, and we'd love to journey on those milestones with you, Justice Cameron, to find out how it's all going to shake out, and particularly what impact it will have on the justice system, to deal with some of those fundamental issues and the structural problems that we already face as we continue. Justice Edwin Cameron, thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate that, sharing with us around the prospects of a bail fund.